Michel Barnier also resumed his criticism of the decision to leave in the first place, claiming it had made Britain's problems more serious. Michel Barnier is pushing Britain to sign a defence and security deal with Brussels because the bloc is desperate for British military capability, Brexiteer Ben Habib has said. Speaking earlier this week, Mr. Barnier, the former EU Brexit negotiator, called for a new kind of cooperation, in the form of a treaty covering defence and security issues, as well as renewing his hostility towards the very concept of Brexit. However, Mr. Habib, a former Brexit Party MEP, has warned that any ratification of such an agreement by UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak risked seriously undermining Britain's military independence. He told Express, "People do not realise, but the UK military is fast slipping into being part of the EU's alternative to NATO, Permanent Structured Cooperation, known as PESCO. The UK has already signed up to PESCO Mobility, a programme which requires the UK not to contravene the security and defence interests of the EU, its security and defence policies, and to support the EU's strategic autonomy and decision-making. We have, in effect, committed to subjugate our security and defence interests where they conflict with those of the EU. There was no such commitment from the UK to any other foreign power, not even NATO," Mr. Habib pointed out. He added, "We are also committed to joining Horizon Europe, which includes among its research programs, the European Defence Fund for Weapons Research, Development and Interoperability. Through this program, our technology, equipment and ability to take action would become dependent on the EU." Right on cue, Barnier is now calling for a formal arrangement with the UK becoming a full member of PESCO. According to Global Firepower's European Military Strength 2023 survey, Britain and France are Europe's two strongest militaries, in first and second place respectively. Mr. Habib continued, "Poland is rapidly catching up, but the EU is desperate for British military capability, under its command. Sunak and the Conservative Parliamentary Party are inherently Europhiles. They have already constitutionally and economically undermined Brexit. They are bound also to undermine it militarily." Mr. Barnier, speaking to Politico's X-Files newsletter, suggested it was in the interests of both parties to strike a deal on defence and foreign policy cooperation. Highlighting what he called the goodwill built up between Brussels and London after the signing of a compromise agreement relating to the Northern Ireland Protocol, the 72-year-old Frenchman said, "We need to build a new kind of cooperation." Then Prime Minister Boris Johnson vetoed the idea of a security treaty with the EU during post-Brexit trade deal negotiations in 2020, even though it had been part of the political declaration that he signed months before. At the time, Britain insisted it was possible to cooperate on defence issues without the need to sign a formal deal. Mr. Barnier added, "There were probably political reasons behind this refusal, but I think it was a mistake. And now, I think it's time. Looking at the situation in Africa, looking at the war in Ukraine, looking at the new challenges for our security and the stability of the continent, I think it would be in our common interest to negotiate a new treaty on defence, external policy, foreign policy and cooperation between the UK and the EU." An unnamed UK minister last month confirmed London and Brussels had reached a consensus on the majority of an agreement for the UK to take part in a military project under the auspices of the EU's Defence Coordination Group, known as the Permanent Structured Cooperation. Mr. Barnier also took the opportunity to voice his ongoing regret about Britain's decision to quit the bloc, describing Brexit as a nonsense and a lose-lose game for both sides. Denying there were any positives from the UK's departure, he also claimed Britain's current difficulties were more serious as a result. Furthermore, he floated the idea of Britain rejoining, saying the door is open for an unlikely return to the fold. Nevertheless, regulatory divergence, which was a key motivation for many Brexiteers, would make such a process significantly more difficult. He explained, "If you have created too big a divergence, it could be a problem because you have to reduce this divergence.